Papa, the girl in the trunk is asking to be let out, our child said during a quiet family drive. His innocent voice cut through the silence, making my heart skip a beat. I turned to my husband, trying to read his reaction. His face, which had been calm a moment ago, turned pale. I couldn't tell if he was trying to play dumb or was genuinely frightened by his words. He glanced back at our child through the rearview mirror, his eyes wide with fear. "That's a scary thing to say," he muttered, trying to dismiss it. "You shouldn't tell such lies." I glared at him from the passenger seat, feeling a knot of suspicion tightening in my chest. "Maybe we should pull over at the rest area," I suggested, my voice sharper than I intended. It had been 6 years since we got married. I had always been supportive of my husband, even though his job kept him busy. I had been the one holding things together at home, managing everything while he focused on his career. But now, with our child's strange words hanging in the air, I felt a chill of uncertainty. Was something dark about to be revealed? My name is Emily Carter, and I married my husband, Michael, when I was 30 years old. He is 5 years older than me, and our relationship had always seemed solid. The year after we got married, our child, Peter, was born, bringing so much joy into our lives. Peter has been growing up healthy and lively and just recently turned 5. Our family had been living busy but happy days, filled with love and laughter. "How about going to the zoo next Friday?" Michael suggested, trying to change the mood. "Yay. I want to see the giraffes." Peter squealed with excitement, his earlier comment seemingly forgotten. I couldn't help but smile at their cheerful conversation, feeling a bit of the tension ease away. Michael had always been a kind and loving husband since we started dating. He was attentive and caring, and that didn't change after we got married and had Peter. On his days off, he would eagerly join in on family activities, playing with Peter and making him laugh. He was the perfect father, always there for us. I often thought about how lucky I was to have married him. Watching Michael and Peter together brought me a deep sense of happiness. Our life was good, stable, and filled with love. But little did I know, those peaceful days were about to be shattered. One day, Michael came home with a heavy sigh, his face looking weary and troubled. "You're being transferred to a different department?" I asked, noticing his downcast expression. "Yeah," he replied, his voice flat. "It's company policy. They want me to gain experience in different places." His words felt like the first crack in our happy life. I didn't know why, but something about this transfer made me uneasy. I could sense that there was more to the story, something Michael wasn't telling me. And as our child's strange words echoed in my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that our lives were about to change in ways I couldn't imagine. Michael was being transferred to the busiest department in his company, which meant he might not be able to spend as much time with us. The news hit our family hard, especially Peter. "Daddy, are you not going to play with me anymore?" Peter asked, his big eyes filled with worry. Michael, trying his best to reassure him, gently stroked his hair and said, "I'll do my best to spend as much time with you as possible, Peter. Let's go to the zoo again sometime soon." Despite his comforting words, I could see the regret in his expression. He knew this transfer was going to change things for us, and the thought of it weighed heavily on his mind. As I watched him with our child, a tightness grew in my chest, overwhelmed with emotions. The transfer didn't involve a change in salary or require us to move, but it was still a big deal for our family. Just the thought of having less time together made me feel incredibly lonely. However, I knew the one feeling the most vulnerable was Michael. Adjusting to a new, more demanding environment would be tough for him. "Please don't push yourself too hard," I said, trying to hide the worry in my voice. I knew Michael had a tendency to throw himself fully into his work, sometimes to the point of exhaustion. That's why I worried about him overdoing it. And unfortunately, my concerns turned out to be justified. At first, Michael managed to balance his work and home life. He still made time for family activities and found moments to rest despite his busy schedule. But about a month after the transfer, everything changed. His time at home decreased dramatically. He started working overtime, often coming home late at night, long after Peter had gone to bed. It became more common for him to go out for drinks with clients, and he even began working on his days off. But there was something else that concerned me even more. One day, I cautiously asked him, "Hey, can you take a day off next Friday? Peter misses you, and you've been working too hard lately." Michael looked at me with a tired, frustrated expression. "Who do you think I'm working so hard for? Should I just turn down client meetings and risk getting fired?" He snapped. I quickly replied, "I didn't mean it like that. I'm just worried about you." "That's none of your business," Michael muttered, brushing me off. "Anyway, make sure you have money ready for next week's drinking party." His words stung, and I could see how much the stress was affecting him. Michael, who had always been kind and patient, was now irritable and short-tempered. He started taking out his frustrations on me more frequently, and I found myself walking on eggshells around him. What worried me even more was how he was spending money extravagantly, claiming it was necessary for entertaining clients. This new habit was beginning to impact our living expenses, adding financial stress to an already tense situation. Because I knew how kind he used to be, I was more worried than angry about his current behavior. It was clear to me that the pressure of his new job was getting to him, and I feared he was going to collapse from overwork if things didn't change. I felt helpless, not knowing how to make things better for him or for our family. As the months passed, Michael's situation only worsened. 5 months after his transfer, he reached a point where he was coming home mostly just to sleep. Our conversations became brief, and the connection we once had felt distant. Peter, feeling the absence of his father, started to show signs of sadness. He often wore a forlorn expression, missing the time they used to spend together. Seeing him like that broke my heart. I knew we couldn't go on like this. I needed to find a way to help Michael before his relentless work schedule took an even bigger toll on our family. But I didn't know where to start. The weight of it all was becoming too much to bear. I knew things couldn't go on like this, so I started trying to figure out a way for Michael to take a break. He was clearly overwhelmed, and our family was suffering because of it. But just as I was beginning to make plans, more bad things started to happen, almost as if the universe was working against us. The worst blow came when my mother, who had been battling an illness for several years, suddenly passed away in the hospital. The moment I heard the news, it felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. "No, Mom," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. My father had died when I was young, so my mother was the only parent I had left. Losing her felt like losing the last piece of my childhood. I couldn't even have a proper conversation with her before she passed away, and that regret weighed heavily on me. When the call came, I was at home, and I was so shocked that I couldn't move for a while. I just stood there, frozen, as the realization hit me that she was really gone. But what hurt even more was Michael's reaction when I told him about my mother's passing. His response was unbelievably cold. "Hey, do I have to go to that funeral too?" he asked, his voice completely devoid of sympathy. I stared at him, my eyes wide with disbelief. "Yes, the relationship between you and my mother might have been distant, but she was still your mother-in-law." "She was family," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Don't get mad at me," he muttered, rolling his eyes. "Oh, why does this have to happen now? I had plans too." His words cut through me like a knife. In the past, Michael would have comforted me, perhaps by rubbing my back and grieving with me together. But now, as he sighed in dissatisfaction, he seemed like a completely different person from the one I had promised to spend my life with. Naturally, he didn't help with any of the preparations for my mother's funeral. I arranged everything alone, feeling more isolated than ever. On the day of the service, Michael remained silent and sullen. He didn't offer any support or comfort, and after the funeral ended, he simply said, "It's over now, right? I'm heading home first," and left without helping with the cleanup. I was initially confused by his reaction, but by then, I had lost the energy to be angry. I was simply bewildered and deeply disappointed in him. No matter how busy or stressed he was from work, His behavior at the funeral was unacceptable. Despite feeling frustrated with him, I finished cleaning up with Peter by my side. He was too young to understand everything that was happening, but he could sense that something was wrong and did his best to help me. "Mom, Peter will help you," he said, his small voice bringing a bit of comfort to my aching heart. After the funeral, I decided to stop by my parents' house for a short while. It wasn't far from our home, and I wanted to say a final goodbye to the place that held so many memories of my mother. Although it was a sad visit, I felt it was something I needed to do for my own peace of mind. When I arrived at my parents' house with a heavy heart, I took a deep breath and walked inside. The house felt empty, a shell of what it used to be. As I stood in the living room, surrounded by the remnants of my mother's life, I felt the weight of everything crashing down. I felt a wave of sorrow wash over me, but before I could even begin to process my feelings, something unexpected happened. "Mom, wait a moment," Peter suddenly shouted, his voice filled with urgency. "Huh, Peter, what's wrong?" I asked, startled by his sudden change in behavior. As soon as we arrived at my parents' house, Peter's expression had shifted dramatically. Without another word, he dashed straight into the back room, leaving me standing there, puzzled and concerned. I quickly followed him, my heart pounding with a mix of anxiety and confusion, wondering what could have caused him to react like this. I had taken Peter to visit my mother's place several times before, but I had never seen him act like this. Curious and concerned, I hurried to follow him as he moved with a sense of purpose. Peter stopped in front of the dresser, his small hands reaching for the second drawer from the bottom. It was as if something was drawing him to it. "Mom, Grandma wants you to have this," he said, holding up an old hand mirror. The sight of the mirror took my breath away. It was an item that had always been precious to my mother. She cherished it so much that she rarely used it, and I didn't even know where she kept it. I stood there, stunned, as I realized that Peter had somehow found this hidden treasure. "How did you know it was here? And what do you mean Grandma wanted me to have it?" I asked, my voice tinged with disbelief. "When Grandma was sleeping earlier, she told me that you were sad and asked me to give this to you." Peter answered innocently, his eyes wide with sincerity. I couldn't hide my surprise. His words sent a chill down my spine. There was no way Peter could have known about the existence of this hand mirror, let alone where it was kept. Yet here he was, holding it out to me with a calm certainty that was both unsettling and awe-inspiring. Wanting to understand what was happening, I decided to ask him some questions, things he couldn't possibly know. I asked about tomorrow's dinner menu, what I was thinking about, and even thoughts I had during the funeral. To my astonishment, Peter answered each question correctly, as if he had read my mind. It became clear to me that my son had a mysterious ability to know what people were thinking. I was both amazed and bewildered. "Wow, that's amazing, Peter. You know everything?" I said, stroking his head gently, still trying to wrap my mind around this revelation. I had always thought that the idea of mysterious abilities was just something from stories, never imagining that my own child might possess such a power. Peter, pure of his newfound ability, put his hand on his high P and gave me a confident look. "That's right. Peter knows everything about day 2. "About day 2? What do you mean?" I asked, my heart skipping a beat. What he told me next was incredibly unbelievable and UNFORGIVABLE. Peter revealed things about my eel that shook me to my core. I listened in realizing that the man I had married was not who I thought he was. A few weeks after my mother's funeral, I decided it was time to confront Michael. On morning, when he was getting ready to leave for work, I casually mentioned, "By the way, I'm visiting my friend with Peter next Friday. My soul, who had been focused on jetting out the door, suddenly assessed in his Terrace case. He frowned, looking genuinely troubled. Really? Oh no, I'm OFF that day. That's too bad, he said, his voice filled with artificial fluency. I could sense the insincerity in his tone. It was clear to me now that he was hiding something. I let out a small, knowing smile, careful not to reveal my true feelings. Now that I knew the truth, there was no left for my tail inside me. That Friday, I left home with PTR as planned. We spent about an hour away, giving me time to gather my thoughts and prepare for what I needed to do. When we returned home, Peter pointed toward the garage and said, "Dad's over there." I took a deep breath and waved a key toward the garage, where the shutter was still down. My heart was pounding, but I knew the victim came. I lighted a light knocked on his shutter, and he lead out to my CKL. I know we will more in there. Open it. There was a moment of silence, then a hesitant voice replied, "Hugh, lie. I thought you and Peter had plans." It's can see LED. I repeal LIEKALNLI. If you are going somewhere, we want to come with you. He sounded fluid and hesitant, clearly not expecting this. Oh, okay, he stammered, reluctant to open the garage shutter. I had a pretty good idea of the way he was going on inside, but decided to stay quiet and observe. Peter wants to go for a drive too, I added, hearing the hope in his voice. Unable to resist, Michael had no choice but to agree. A few minutes later, he reluctantly opened the garage, and we started our drive together. Sitting in the passenger seat, I looked at Michael as he drove. His profile was tense, and it solidified my final decision. Life with Michael had once been enjoyable and happy, but I knew those days would never come back. Hey, did you know Peter has a special power? I finally brought it up as we emerged onto the highway. Michael furrowed his brows, confused by my sudden theory. Is that funny? That's a silly joke, he. Michael laughed dismissively. Daddy, why, the boy in the trunk is asking you to let him out. Peter suddenly raised his voice from the back seat. I waited as Michael's face turned pale. He glanced at Peter through the rear view mirror with a frightened expression. I'm in. What a scary thing to say. You didn't tell such lies, he said nervously. But it's true, Peter insisted. Then should we pull over at the rest area? I suggested, trying to support Peter's leave. Michael immediately looked at me, startled. Hugh, we don't need to do that. It's just a kid's joke, he said, trying to brush it off. Peter has a mysterious power, you know. Besides, it's hot today, and it could be dangerous if someone's really in there. He must have my sage made sense because, after flinching and staying, He reluctantly headed towards the rest area, his expression contorted. Upon arrival, we left Peter in the air-conditioned car and went outside to check the trunk. I don't think there's anything in there, Michael muttered. Come on, quickly, I urge you to. Realizing he couldn't escape anymore, Michael nervously opened the trunk, breaking into a cold sweat. In the next moment, a young woman jumped out, her face flushed red from the heat. I knew you were cheating, I shouted, my suspicions confirmed me. The young woman, looking embarrassed and uncomfortable, stood there while Michael shook his head. No, it's not like that. She's a colleague from work. We were just working together, he stammered, trying to explain. Wow, working in the trunk of our car, I retorted sarcastically. At the new department, you're doing a job. Michael's excuses were pathetic and unbelievable. It turned out that while Peter and I were out, Michael had been cheating with this woman at home. They were about to go for a drive when we returned unexpectedly, so he had no choice but to hide her in the trunk. As the woman was taken away, Michael seemed unable to fully grasp the situation. He kept trying to come up with more excuses, but I wasn't listening anymore. I knew our marriage was over. The trust and love we once had were gone, replaced by betrayal and lies. I looked at Peter, who was watching everything quietly from the car. I knew I had to be strong for him, to move on and build a new life without Michael. I laughed at how ridiculous Michael's lie was, standing my ground as I pulled out a piece of paper from my bag. And what is this? I asked, showing him the paper. It read, let's go on a drive date on Friday. Michael and the woman, Janice, turned pale when they saw it. It was no surprise. They could see their flirty email exchanges printed right there. Thanks to Peter, I had found out everything on the day of my mother's funeral at my parents' house. My son had told me, Daddy has been spending a lot of time with Janice lately. I'm sad because Janice is taking Daddy away from me. After witnessing Peter's strange ability to know things, I became suspicious and decided to keep an eye on Michael. Sure enough, I found undeniable proof of his affair on his phone, so I had made up the fake plan to catch him in the act. It's a shame this drive turned out this way, I said sarcastically. It's unfair to look through my phone without permission. Michael protested, his body tense as he reacted to my words. His absurd remark made me burst into laughter. I thought you were just busy with work, but it turned out you were spending time with Janice, using our money for your dates. Who exactly is being unfair here? I shot back. By the way, I've been recording everything since we got into the car. Remembering all the wrongs Michael had done, I pulled out my phone from my pocket. I had secretly pressed the record button to capture everything. And the evidence I had wasn't just messages and this video. I'd also set up hidden cameras in our house and garage. And Janice, I know everything about you too. Under my relentless confrontation, they both turned white as sheets. I was furious with Michael, but I couldn't forgive Janice either. I had thoroughly investigated my husband and figured out who she was. Janice was a 27-year-old new employee who worked with Michael in his new department. From the messages, it was clear she knew about me, yet she still went ahead with the affair, making her just as guilty. Oh, sorry, Emily, Michael whimpered, clearly not expecting to be cornered so perfectly. His pitiful attempt to plead with me only filled me with more disgust. I glared at both of them with all the anger I could muster. I will not forgive either of you. Get ready to pay alimony. Hearing my firm words, and perhaps realizing their fate, both of them collapsed to their knees. After that, I divorced Michael. The fact that I had recorded everything and gathered all the evidence paid off. They were ordered to pay $650,000 in compensation. I was also able to get $1,000 a month in child support from my ex-husband. But their trouble didn't stop there. I heard that news of their affair spread throughout the whole company, especially since they worked in the same department. This made things very uncomfortable for them, and eventually they broke up. Their coworkers started to disapprove of them, and in the end, they had no choice but to resign. Now, I've heard they're struggling with the burden of the compensation payments and are left with nothing. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying peaceful days with Peter. I'm focused on giving him lots of love and support, knowing he has a special gift.